Now, I'm really, really excited to introduce you to our speakers. First up, we have Jane Hatton, who is the founder and CEO at Evenbreak. Jane is a disabled social entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and author. She founded the award-winning social enterprise Evenbreak in 2011. Evenbreak is run by and for disabled people, aiming to make the world of work accessible and inclusive so that disabled people have the same opportunities to enter, thrive, and progress in the workplace as non-disabled people. It also supports employers to help remove disabling barriers and to be more inclusive and accessible through training, consultancy, events, and online resources. It also provides disabled people with a place for them to work through online resources and as well helps both those groups to find each other on an accessible job board. Jane is going to be joined in conversation with our own amazing senior account executive, Anastasia Rabb. Anastasia has an unbelievable background, but I'm not going to try and sum it up for you here. I'm really excited to turn the floor over to you, ladies. So take it away.
Thank you, Meg. And thank you, Jane, for being here today. I'm so excited to get a chance to dive into your work, what you do, the importance of it, get to know you. And before we kind of get into the meat of the conversation, I'd love for you to just kind of ground us in who you are a bit more in your own words, maybe how you like your career journey or how you got to, founding the amazing company that you did would be really cool to understand.
That's great. Thank you, Anastasia. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here at this amazing event with all these other amazing speakers. So I am one of the 83% of disabled people who became disabled as an adult. So I wasn't born as a disabled person. Most disabled people aren't. And I was in my 40s when I acquired a spinal condition, which had various spinal surgeries, which didn't really help very much. But I'd already been in the field of diversity and equality and inclusion prior to that, for many, many years prior to that. And I'd spoken to employers about the benefits of having a diverse workforce, including people with disabilities. And I'd get two reactions from employers. One would be, why on earth would I want to employ people with disabilities? I mean, they wouldn't say it in those words, but you'd kind of know what they meant. Or more positively, employers would say, we recognize that this is a whole pool of talent that we haven't really been tapping into, and we don't really know how to, and people with disabilities don't apply. And when I said to disabled people, why aren't you applying to the second lot of employers? They would say, well, because we don't know which is which, because every employer says we are an equal opportunities employer, but actually their experience was that most weren't. And then when I became disabled, I thought, this is not going away, this issue, and nobody's doing anything about it. So we came up with the idea of having a job board that was just for disabled candidates or people looking for work, and just for those employers who were enlightened enough to see us as a pool of talent rather than a source of problems. And so that was back in 2011, because by this time I had become disabled. So it's kind of like someone up there has a quirky sense of humor. And I suddenly became, one of those people I'd been talking about previously, which actually just gave me that lived experience, gave me a whole different insight into the whole world of equality through a disability lens. And so, we've been going for just over 10 years. We only employ people with disabilities at Evenbreak. So we all have a variety of different conditions, might be sight loss or autism or whatever it might be. And we're a social enterprise, so we're a not-for-profit. But the idea is that we would like to do ourselves out of a job. We'd like not to need to be Evenbreak at all, because we'd like the world of work to be so inclusive and accessible that you don't need that additional support that Evenbreak offers. But of course, we're not there yet. There's still, huge disparity between the proportion of disabled people in work and non-disabled people in work.
And thank you so much for creating a community that can be trusted by those folks. That's super important on that journey to getting there.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you for kind of grounding our conversation and where you're coming from. I kind of want to jump right into my first question, which is, can you tell us about kind of right? Okay, sorry, let me take a step back. Let's jump into the value that disabled people bring to a remote and hybrid workplace.
Yeah.
And specifically, kind of what are some of the statistics that demonstrate that value?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I started Evenbreak 10 years ago and I talked to employers about employing disabled people, the response would be very much one of, oh, it's such a shame, poor people, we really ought to give them a chance. And we'd say, no, this isn't about pity, it's not about charity, this is about talent. And the reality is that, you know, the social model of disability means that disabled people aren't disabled by our conditions, but by the barriers that we face in society. And so what we need to do is remove those barriers. And it's not the fact that we are disabled that stops us from performing or getting jobs. It's the fact that there are inaccessible recruitment processes or inaccessible buildings or inaccessible transport, for example. But the reality is that for all of us who are disabled, whatever our condition might be, we have to navigate around barriers every day, whether that's inaccessible transport or websites or whatever it might be. And what that means is that we develop all sorts of other qualities. So we have to develop qualities around working in different ways, being flexible. Maybe we can't do something the way someone else does it, so we have to do it differently and think creatively. So when I became disabled, for many years, I was unable to sit because of the pain in my spine. So I had to work out ways of running an online business lying down, which, meant I had to be creative in terms of how do I suspend a laptop above me so that it doesn't fall on my face and so that I could, and actually you develop all sorts of skills like creative thinking, problem solving, resilience, because if you didn't, if you ran away at the first sign of a problem, you would never get out of bed. And so all disabled people will face barriers. There may be different barriers depending on whatever their condition might be. But it means that from an employer's perspective, what we bring with us is that flexibility, that ability to look at things differently, maybe to find different ways of doing things. So I think before the pandemic, there was very much a view that everybody, whoever they were, had to work full time. They had to work in the office. They had to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And that was the only way to work. And actually what we've learned in the pandemic is that there are lots of great ways of working, which may be full-time from home. It may be full-time in the office. It may be a combination of the two. It might mean not working full-time. It might mean working different hours. But actually what we've learned in the pandemic is that we're just as productive. People who work from home aren't skiving. In fact, if anything, we're working harder because there isn't that boundary between home and work. And actually, because things are very different now, I think that disabled people particularly are really well suited for finding ways of making that new way of working work. So whether it's hybrid working, whether it's working different shifts, different work patterns, working flexibly, working maybe, different hours, job sharing, job carving, all of those things are things that people with disabilities have been doing forever. And so actually now the world has changed and everybody's struggling because it's new and it's different. I feel that people with disabilities can lead the way because we're used to doing things differently and finding solutions to problems. And, and tech, of course, is so good now so that people can work from home, and tech needs to be accessible, not just for disabled people, but for everybody else as well. So, I think organizations really need to be led by disabled people in terms of how do we do this? How do we make this work? Because it's something we've always been doing.
I love that so much. And thank you for sharing some of the real kind of on the job skills, right? Or that disabled employees bring to these types of workplaces. Would you say that there are any particular skills that that they bring that maybe their non-disabled peers might not have, aside from being able to work in the hybrid environment very well from the start? There's
lots of research that talks about people with disabilities in the workplace and the difference between us and non-disabled people. And it really goes against the whole narrative around disabled people being not as good as non-disabled people and being somehow less than. And I think we've been brought up, we're conditioned to think that disabled is somehow less than non-disabled. But actually, when we look at the evidence, there are lots of studies that have been done and research that's been done at different times in different countries over the years that actually proves that on average, and of course every individual is different, but on average, disabled people are just as productive as non-disabled people. But we have significantly less time off sick on average, which might be a bit counterintuitive, but actually disability doesn't equal illness. So if you imagine someone who's blind or someone who has a limb missing, there's no reason why they should be more prone to having colds or, stomach bugs than anybody else. But all of us are used to working under difficult circumstances. So if we get a sniffle or a headache, we're not going to phone in sick. We're going to go in to work anyway because we're used to working under difficult circumstances. So the research says that disabled people have, on average, up to 30% less sickness absence than our non-disabled colleagues. So that's huge for some organisations who have, high rates of sickness. And also in terms of retention, disabled people tend to stay in our jobs for longer. And now that might be for the wrong reason. It might be because we're worried about, would another employer take us on and would they be receptive to any access needs that we might have? But nevertheless, again, from the employer's perspective, having a high staff turnover can be incredibly expensive, and having to recruit new people and train new people and, that gap in productivity while all of that's going on. So that's another benefit. And then things like, if you think about the world generally, about a fifth of the world's population, so that's over 1 billion people in the world, are disabled or have long-term health conditions. And we're not just disabled people, we're consumers, and we're parents, and we're family members, and we're voters, and all of those things. So as an organisation, that's a huge market. And, in terms of the money that is brought in, we're talking about, £1 trillion a year from disabled people globally. So why wouldn't we want to know that the products or the services that our business produce or provide are accessible to that market too? Because that's a lot of money to leave on the table if we're not including disabled people as our customers, as our clients and consumers and people who are actually paying for our services. And actually, if we're employing disabled people within our organisations, that gives us that internal intelligence in terms of how do we market to disabled people? What do we need to do to our products and services to make them accessible? How do we make sure that disabled people know that their voices are being heard in this organisation? And so in terms of bottom line business benefits, it's not about charity or pity. It's about new markets. It's about innovation. Disabled people think often differently because we've had to develop all of these new skills, but also people who are, say, neurodiverse, so people who are autistic or have ADHD or dyslexia, for example, their brains literally are wired differently. And so if a problem comes up, they will come up with solutions that the rest of us would never think of, in a million lifetimes. At Evenbreak, we have a number of team members who are neurodiverse. And sometimes in team meetings, we'll be wrestling with a problem, or how can we do this, or what we're going to do. And one of our teammates who's neurodiverse will come up with a solution, and the rest of us will go, no, that's just ridiculous. And then you think about it a bit longer and you think, no, it isn't. It's absolute genius. And it's just that challenging of the status quo, actually people saying, why have we always done it this way? Because there are other ways of doing things which might be better. And actually, I think every organisation needs people who challenge that group think and that, well, we've always done it this way, so we're always going to do it this way. And the value of having someone saying, but is there a better way? Is there a different way? Can we be different from our competitors? Can we do something new and innovative? I think, employing neurodiverse people isn't charity. It's almost a business imperative if you want to stay ahead of the competition. So in terms of employing disabled people, it's very much about the bottom line business benefits that you can get from employing people who have different experiences, different life experiences, way over and above anything to do with, the standard skills and qualities that they have, which they share with non-disabled people.
That's so important. And I'm always so here for like the myth busting that has to go down in conversations like these. So thank you for outlining some of those business insights really, really clearly. I want to then kind of shift into outside of the impact on business that disabled employees offer to their organizations to the impact on positively shaping company culture.
Yeah, I think definitely. Yeah. I mean, the culture is really important, because you could have the most inclusive recruitment process on the planet, but if the culture isn't inclusive, it's like a revolving door. People will come in and then they'll go straight out again. And of course, people talk. So then your reputation is, I wouldn't work there. They're not very good employers. And so I think that the impact for organizations by employing diverse people, and of course, disabled people aren't just disabled, they will also be diverse ethnically and in terms of gender or sexual orientation or age, and, you know, all of the other differences that we know about. And having an organization that embraces that difference means that the organization becomes curious, and it learns, and it challenges, and it questions. And it means that people can be themselves. So, you know, you might have an organization which is very, you know, very macho culture. And then actually the women feel that they've got to compete and they've got to work long hours in order to get, you know, ahead in the game. But actually there are lots of men who don't want to work long hours. They may be family men. They may do things outside of the workplace. So I think if we start looking at what organizations do to embrace and include people who are different, actually, although it might initially be around the disabled person or whatever it is, actually everybody benefits. So just a simple example, if you have a door that's automatic as you go towards it, that's great for someone who uses a wheelchair, but it's also great for someone who's pushing a buggy or for someone who's carrying heavy things and hasn't got an arm free to open the door. So although it might have been put in there from an accessibility perspective, actually everybody benefits. And what we find is that pretty much everything that applies to, so whether it's altering the recruitment process so that it's more inclusive for people who are autistic or people who are blind or people who have learning disability, for example, actually makes it a better recruitment process, a more accurate, predictive recruitment process for all candidates. And so everybody benefits. So all candidates benefit because they're being tested on their real abilities rather than something that's not relevant. But also it means that employers are using the best ways of assessing future talent. So they get the best talent and they attract the best talent. So, you know, things that we might do to change the culture to make it more inclusive for disabled people or for any other minority group actually make it better for everybody. And I think there's a kind of, sometimes there's a fear that, well, if we do things for women, the men are going to lose out. If we do things for Black and minority ethnic people, the white people are going to lose out. And actually, that's not the case at all. It's absolutely the opposite. By making things more inclusive and real and open and accepting that everybody has the same right to be there, everybody benefits. You know, whether you're white, male, disabled, non-disabled, makes no difference. It makes it a better culture where everyone can thrive and be themselves and not have to mask or pretend or play a part that they're not really comfortable with.
Absolutely. And I bet we could come up with a long list of examples, like, you know, the automatic door that you gave that had like origins in something really specific, but then the ripple effects and impacts on how other people, you know, end up benefiting from it or using that thing that even, you know, builds and off of it is very long.
It is phenomenal. I mean, you think of things like the smartphones, that everybody has a smartphone now, but a lot of the features on the smartphone were put there for accessibility purposes. So Siri, Alexa, you know, whatever it might be, that was for people who can't see the screen. But most people I know who are non-disabled are using those features now because it just makes life easier. So I think, you know, there are lots of examples where, as you say, you know, things were put in place for accessibility reasons, but actually they might make life better for everybody. And what's not to like about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't live without Siri at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And why would we want to? You know, I think that's the whole thing. It's about innovation, isn't it? And challenging what we've done before and doing things differently. And we'll come up with better ways of doing things that everybody benefits from.
100%. Jane, I want to kind of now bring it back to the work that you do with your company, and kind of if you could share a little bit to our audience on how they can find out more about hiring and working with disabled people in flexible workplaces.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. So we're Evenbreak, so we're global because it's online. So it's evenbreak.co.uk, but although it's a .co.uk, we still work in other countries as well. And I'm very, very happy to talk to people about my favorite subject, as you can probably tell, about what they can do. And sometimes it doesn't need to be major things. You know, it doesn't mean that you've got to completely knock your building down and rebuild it or start writing your policies from scratch. Sometimes it's very small tweaks that you might do that just make things easier for everybody. So making sure that you ask every candidate, for example, if they need adjustments in the recruitment process is good practice. You know, not to say, are you disabled? Do you need adjustments? But just to say to everyone, we want you to shine in our recruitment process. What do we need to do? And that just makes every candidate feel, oh, they really care about their candidates. The whole candidate experience is much better, higher quality for everybody. So yes, Evenbreak, if you look up evenbreak.co.uk, that's us. And then there's a career hive, which is a careers service for disabled people who are looking for new or better work. And that's at hive.evenbreak.co.uk.
Well, that actually transitions well into a question that we got from the audience that someone shared. You know, I find that people with disabilities often get pigeonholed into jobs in certain areas, but mentioned factories, grocery and food service, corporate mailrooms, etc. How did you break through these types of ceilings?
Yeah, my concern when I started Evenbreak was that those would be the only kind of jobs that people would advertise with us, that it would be very sort of important jobs, but low skilled jobs, low paid jobs. You know, jobs that don't need qualifications. And it was actually the opposite, I'm really pleased to say. So we have lots of banks that advertise with us and, you know, financial services and broadcasters and a whole range of different sectors. And I think it's because some of it is because, as I said before, you know, most disabled people weren't born disabled. So they have the same quality of education and qualifications as everybody else, but then something happens. So why would they want to work in a factory necessarily when they've got a degree or they've got, you know, they're a lawyer or whatever it might be? And so what we discovered is that disabled people are incredibly able and that actually all jobs should be opened up to disabled people. Now, not every disabled person is going to be able to do every job in the same way that not every non-disabled person is going to be able to do every job. So I couldn't do a job that required me to speak French because I don't speak French. That's got nothing to do with my disability. But I wouldn't go for a job that required me to speak French. And in the same way, disabled people won't go for jobs that they can't do. But actually, the reality is, if I look at Evenbreak, about 60 to 70% of our candidates have at least one degree. And so they're not going to be looking for mailroom jobs and for, you know, retail and hospitality jobs. Many do, and that's fine. We need people to do those jobs, and that's absolutely great. But we shouldn't pigeonhole any group of people. It's as ridiculous as saying, you know, everybody with green eyes should do this particular job, or anybody with blonde hair should do that particular job. You know, the fact that you're disabled bears no relation to what qualities you bring to the workplace. So, and it's an education, really. It's very difficult to, you know, educate employers that disabled people have just the same diversity of skills and qualities as everybody else.
Thank you for answering that. And again, doing some myth busting there. But there's another great question that came in from the audience from Letitia. She asks, what would you suggest one should do to be seen by employers once you disclose your disability on the application?
Well, you see, there isn't a straight answer to that, because we say to our candidates, you know, only talk about your disability when it suits you to do so. So if you're someone who has an invisible disability, which is most of us, you might decide not to mention it at all, and that's fine. It's entirely up to you. You can't then expect to have accommodations made for you if they don't know that you're disabled and you need them. But actually, for me, it's about, you know, you talk about it when it suits you to do so. But actually, whenever that is, to talk about it in a very positive way. So instead of, for example, saying, oh, I'm autistic, so I can't do this and I'm not very good at that, it's saying, oh, I'm autistic, which means I'm really good at details or I'm really good at repetitive work. So it's about talking about disability, but in a really positive way. So, for example, you know, we have a number of people working at Evenbreak who have different conditions, and we have a couple of people who are blind, and they are really, really good at hearing the inflection in people's voices. So they read the tone of voice much more accurately than I ever would. And conversely, our COO is deaf, and she spots nonverbal communication much better than I do. She's much more sensitive to it because she uses all of the nonverbal communication to help her understand. So I think if we're talking to employers about being disabled, it's really important that we couch that in a very positive way. So it's not, oh, I'm disabled, so I'm not going to be any good at this, or I'm going to need that. It's, I'm disabled, therefore I'm really good at X, Y, or Z. And I think for me, that's how we do it. And that's actually going to challenge employers thinking on, oh, wasn't expecting that answer.
And that's also, absolutely. And that's like a mindset that you can apply to so many other parts of your life or your work. And I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
We call our candidates at Evenbreak premium candidates because they're disabled, which means they have the same diversity of skills and qualities as everybody else, but they also have all of those additional things we talked about. So problem solving, creative thinking, determination, resilience, all of that. So actually, when they go to an employer, I think it's fair for them to say, yes, I have all of the things that the other candidates have that will have applied for this job, but I bring these extra things with me as well. And actually, we need to think of ourselves as premium candidates and then educate the employers about that.
Wow, I love that. That's also such a perfect way to end I think the conversation. I mean, we have 2 more minutes, but I know that folks are jumping on, and if there's anything else, Jane, that you would love to share as part of this conversation that you wish someone had asked you or I had asked you.
I think no, you've asked some really good, insightful questions. I think for me, it's just about changing the narrative around disability, and for employers not to see disability as something to do with pity or charity, but actually it's all about talent. And now more than ever, now we're moving into this new hybrid world, different ways of working, that actually disabled people can be leading the way and actually showing other people, how to work in different ways, how to be flexible. And we really are premium candidates right now.
Amazing. And you're getting some love in the chat. I know you might not be able to see it, but thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and share these insights. It's so important. And
thank you for inviting me. It was great to be here.
Absolutely.
Thank you both. That was absolutely wonderful to get to listen in on. And I know that it was very impactful for our audience as well. So thank you to both of you.